Is there a way out? Can I change my brain? Am I just a victim to who I am? I'm your host, Steve Sisler. Stay tuned for another episode of Behavioral Insights.
What is behavior without intelligence? Coming up next on Behavioral Insights, the 3 levels of emotional maturity. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm your host, Steve Sisler. I was away this past week, so it's good to get back into the swing of things, especially this podcast. So I opened with a question. What is behavior without intelligence? Well, not much. Behavior alone, you need to know, looks the same regardless of the intelligence that may be behind it. And what I mean is that, for example, all dominant people types will likely make quick decisions given they believe they know what must be done. Another example, influential people types, they will tend to make emotional decisions, and this is regardless of their level of intelligence, both intellectually and emotionally. Now, there are differing levels of maturity, intuition, and intelligence encompassing decision-making in everybody. The behavior is the same in terms of what you would expect a particular person to do that has a certain combination of consistencies in their emotional framework. So combining behavioral dynamics with attitudes, motivation, and values gives us predictable behavior sets. And there are valuations and judgments behind that behavior. So I may behave a certain way, but the emotions driving that behavior can be very predictable. But the things that I do with my behavior are largely dependent on my emotional maturity levels and my social intelligence, or my EQ, we'll call it that. Some of you know, most of you probably know what that means. It's your emotional quotient. So in other words, all leaders, let's say, who take charge without permission, let's say, in any given situation, will likely have an extended power motive alongside of a dominant cardinal trait. So the dominance is a consistent anger emotion, which causes me to look at the world and then take what I believe belongs to me out of the world. And the motive of power and control behind the taking becomes the reason for the taking, because some people who are inconsistent with power, they're more satisfied in the world. Although they may be somewhat dominant, the way they exercise their potency or their power in the world will be a lot different than a dominant type that has a motivation to be powerful in the world. And we've talked about this in the past, the two kinds of power, which are power to and power over. So having power over a person is different than having a power towards persons. It's very different. So if an individual has average, no, I'm not going to say average. Let me say it this way. If a person has below average intelligence and they have limited emotional and social intelligence, then they may be in charge of their local gang or possibly the captain of the neighborhood stickball team, but they're not likely to be the manager of the IT department at Harvard University. And so this is what people need to understand. Your intelligence is pretty set at birth. People, let's say if you have an IQ of 107 at age 7, you're likely going to have an IQ of around 107 at age 77. That IQ level, based upon all the IQ studies that have been done over the years, it really doesn't change a whole lot. It can differ on a point or two, but it pretty much hovers around the same place as it began. Now, people tend to believe that the more educated they are, then the smarter they get. And that's simply not true. If I have a master's degree and my IQ is 104, then I'm more informed because I have new knowledge about maybe how something works, or, who wrote the book The Pearl, John Steinbeck, by the way, or something like that. So having education really translates into the fact that you're more informed, but it doesn't translate to you are a smarter person. Some of you listening know people with degrees, and that could stem from an AA degree, an Associates of Arts degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, or a postdoctoral degree of any kind, and do stupid things. And so we know that smart is not the same as informed. So I want to make that clear. Now, behavior and emotions are the same for all human beings. The anger, the optimism, the patience, the fear, emotions look the same on every human face in the world. Those emotions perform the same for every human in the world. And this is despite their level of intelligence. So unintelligent people can get mad, just like intelligent people get mad. But the difference would be people with lower intelligence are likely to get mad at the wrong time, say the wrong thing to the wrong person. So knowing what to say, how to say it, and when to say it is an intelligence issue. It's not a behavioral issue. Just as there are many levels of maturity within the human maturity spectrum, so let's think of babies, toddlers, children, teens, adults, and then the elderly. I have also found levels of maturity within the human brain that have nothing to do with age. I have known many children mature beyond their years, and I've known some adults that seemingly are just not knitting with two needles. I've worked in the work world for more than 30 years and lived on the earth for 56. So I've discovered those who have strong common sense and many who appear to have no sense at all. Interestingly enough, all are employed, all are married, and all drive cars. So over the years of witnessing this phenomenon, I've come to a conclusion about these things. And this is my conclusion. Now, this is based on my experiences. This is based on my work in human behavior and my working with people for roughly 30 years. So I want to make that clear. I'm not getting this out of a science book. I'm getting this out of an experience and working a long time with human beings on every level. And this is how I'm coming to this conclusion, and I'm just going to share it with you. So there are 3 levels of emotional maturity and effectiveness that work together. Now remember, before we get into this, you have to understand that our emotions, and when I say our emotions, I'm talking about our primary emotions, which are the emotions that are primarily responsible for how we're going to do something in the world. There are many emotions, not just 4. I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about disgust. I'm not talking about happy per se, or being thrilled, those types of emotions. I'm just talking about the anger emotion, the optimistic emotion, the patience emotion, and the fear emotion, which are so prominent when it comes to how we're about to do things. Most of our behavioral tools in the marketplace are based on these primary emotions. All right, let's talk about the first type of person. And I call this I call these maturity levels. So there's 3 levels, and each level represents a type of a person. So you're on one of these 3 levels. So let's talk about level 1. Level 1 is the highest level of what I call emotional effectiveness. People that reside on this level tend to be very effective in what they do. And it's almost regardless of what it is they're doing. They seem to always rise to the top of whatever position they hold, and they inevitably move beyond lower and mid-level positions in work. Now, this is due in large part to how they process information and how they make judgments. So, and more importantly than these, I believe it's due to their intuitive reasoning. Now, intuitive reasoning can be translated into intuitive insights. I always like to use the word insights in my work. Behavioral insights. That's the name of the podcast. But intuitive insights are rarely learned through books or educational venues. Intuitive reasoning is built in, and it's an ability to emotionally navigate troubled waters without a compass. It's I know what to do, but I don't know why I know what to do. So most of what I'm talking about, you don't learn. You have it or you don't have it. Similar to the IQ. You either have one that's high, you have one that's moderate or average, or you have one that's below average. And there's nothing you can do about it. And this is something that the world, I believe, culturally speaking, is trying to depart from. Because we're in a society that doesn't do comparisons anymore. And, the number one case in point, nobody can be the winning team, so everybody gets a trophy. That type of reasoning, I think, maybe their intent can be understood as to why they're doing this. It makes sense to me why people would want to do this. But what doesn't make sense to me is they keep doing it when they find out it doesn't do anything. But that's a particular brain bias where you have so much vested into making the change that there's no turning back, even if you know what you're doing is stupid. So this first level of maturity that I call level 1, these are the people who simply, they know what to say, they know what not to say, and they know when to say or not say it automatically. They don't have to be trained. They just know when to hold their tongue. King Solomon was witness to this fact nearly 3,000 years ago. In his wisdom literature, he, being a wise man himself, he puts forth this amazing treatise of emotionally intelligent anecdotes for emotionally wise decision-making in hopes others would follow his instruction, right? So I'm going to just go over a couple of them with you here. So here's the first one. I'm quoting King Solomon here. Stay away from a foolish person. You will not find knowledge on their lips. That's Proverbs 14:7. So according to this passage here, according to this wise king, he never spent quality time with people who did not increase his knowledge bank. He just didn't do it. We know that he was benevolent to people, but when it came to hanging out, he only did that with those people he could learn from. Now, why did he do that? Well, I'll tell you why. It wasn't something he probably learned. He just did it once and then enjoyed the experience of gaining knowledge. And so he did it again. Some people rob a bank. They enjoy getting free money, and so they do it again. But is that smart? And the answer is no. It's not smart. But yet the same process unfolds. I enjoy doing it, and I do it again. You may be at a friend's house, and you may have a couple margaritas, a glass of wine, a beer or two, I don't know, but you're eating finger foods, you're sitting by the fire, you're a really good person, you have a family, and then you get up to leave and you're just a little bit dizzy and you start to think in your head, I'm fine, blah, blah, blah. You get in the car, you start driving, and you're realizing that you are a couple fries short of a Happy Meal right now. But it's late. There's not a lot of cars on the street, so you decide to keep going. You get home and you think about it and you think, that was pretty risky. You were probably not thinking about who you could have killed. You're probably more thinking about killing yourself. And so you think to yourself, I don't want to do that again. And let's say 2 weeks go by and you're at another gathering and the same thing happens again, and you do it again. The more you do that, the more you start to convince yourself that you're able to drive somewhat inebriated. Now, enter another learning moment. You're having a conversation with somebody and you're talking about somebody who got stopped for a DUI, and they say to you, in Florida, it can cost upwards to $20,000 for a DUI before it's all said and done. And you hear that information, and because you're economically driven, that one sentence causes you to say to yourself, I will never do that again, and you don't. Okay? So that right there is a process of learning through not necessarily trial and error, but learning through some experience and leveraging information that you take in and being able to predict your future. Now, there are some people who have too much to drink, drive, crash, get a DUI, and then do it again. And they keep doing it. What is the difference between the person A that I brought up that has a family, has a job, tries to do right by society, just believes I can get home, it's late, there's not many cars on the road, and they rationalize that, blah, blah, blah. But then at some point, they're consistently thinking about it, and they get a little bit more information, and then there's a tipping point. That one bit of information that causes them to say to themselves, I'm never doing this again, even though nobody knows that's been happening. This is what we call self-correcting. So some people self-correct. They course-correct on their own once they have whatever amount of information they need to create that tipping point. There are other people, there is never enough information to cause them to course-correct. And there's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. And so this is what you need to understand. We are who we are, and to the degree that we have some functional ability, and it's based on all of our experiences up until the point of right now, it's based on our DNA, our genome, so to speak. It's based on our upbringing. It's based on peer involvement and interaction during the formative years. So this is what's known as determinism, and I have a whole podcast about it. So I believe it's the word free will is mentioned in that podcast. I can't remember right now the full name of it, but check it out if you haven't heard it. So pretty much, folks, you're stuck with the brain you have, and you got to do the best you can with it. And people that end up making better and better decisions already had the capacity to do that at birth. They just, matured into it. But they didn't invent it. They didn't create it out of nothing. It was already there. So here's another proverb from King Solomon. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. That's one of my favorites. Proverbs 21:1. So level 1 thinkers invite correction. They're open to doing things differently. These are those who always learn from their mistakes as opposed to hiding them or blaming others for their mistakes. Okay? So if you are a person who is self-correcting, you are a person who, when you make a mistake, you see it for what it is. You have no problem talking about it. You can share your mistakes with other people and even laugh about them or cry, right? But you don't blame everybody else for your problems, okay? This is a level 1 person. Here's another one from King Solomon. The mocker seeks wisdom and finds none, but knowledge comes easy to the discerning. Proverbs 14:6. This is one of my favorites. From what Solomon could perceive here, certain people will never be clever, and because of this, they ridicule everybody who is. Oh my God, that is fascinating to me. It appears that there's a group of people that gain wisdom almost by accident. And this is an interesting statement because it reveals a nugget of incredible importance here. Although the discerning heart and I'm going to italics this word for you, seeks knowledge, it appears to come easily to these people as well. So knowledge comes easy to the discerning. So this discerning, it's an ancient way of saying intuitive. So, quote, discernment, unquote, is intuition. It's being intuitive. So Solomon recognized that there are intuitive people in the world, those that put their intuition to work, recognizing its dexterity. So intuitive people not only are intuitive, they find their intuition useful. Okay? There are some people that have some intuition, but they don't use it. And this is a difference maker between level 1, level 2, level 3 people. And so the people that use it, they know how powerful it is. So super intuitive people are lifelong learners. Every setback for these people is an opportunity to learn within this level. I've seen a lot of memes in social media these days that say something to the effect of, you either win or you learn. So rather than saying we lost, the quote is that you either win or you learn. Centers in on the fact that when you lose, it becomes a learning opportunity to figure out why that happened and then what you can shift in your behavior, in your consciousness, in your thinking to not lose like that again. Very important to understand that. So here's another quote from Solomon. Pride breeds quarrels, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. Proverbs 13:10. So this again is one of my favorites. So people who have too much pride in themselves will always end up in a conflict with other people, but those who are able to take advice from other people will be filled with wisdom. Now, I want you to understand something. Pride breeds quarrels. All right? What does that mean? It means when you have an exaggerated sense of self, you will get into arguments all the time. And why is this? It's because that person thinks if they're not correct, they're bad. If they're not correct, there's something wrong with them. So their human worth is centered in their correctness, not in their humanness. And this is a recipe for stupid. It's a recipe for disaster. And so people who are able to take advice don't get into arguments. Did you get that? The people who argue less don't care what they look like if they don't know the answer. And that is a level 1 human. So you need to get a hold of that in a really strong way. Taking advice isn't easy for everybody. But the people that have a level 1 maturity rating, they can take advice all day long, even from people of lesser intelligence. They can take advice from. Oh my gosh. Okay, so there are also levels within levels here. For example, top level speakers all make over $10,000 for a talk. But some make $100,000 for a talk. Some people make $400,000 for a talk. And I'm sure there are people that can get $1 million for a talk. But top level speakers begin at 10,000 as a rule. Now, Brene Brown, when she gave a talk, she could get $5,000. And I happen to know somebody who had her come in and said she was very grateful for the $5,000. But if you want Brene Brown to speak to your group today, it begins at $100,000 for that talk. She was worth probably that on her first talk, but she didn't know it. So your talk is worth what somebody's going to pay for it, okay? So they're all in the top 1%, but some of those will never make more than $20,000 for a talk, but they're still in the top 1% of talkers. They're still considered a top-level speaker and will be in the top 1%. But the average speaker makes between $500 and $2,500 for a talk and is content with it. Okay? So there are differing levels of mature within level 1, just like there are different levels of speakers within level 1 speakers. The best thing about those within this level 1 group is that they can all grow and become better. So you may begin at 500, but you might quickly rise to 10,000, which is what happened to me. And so once you break the 10,000 barrier, you're probably worth up to 30 to 40,000. If you're getting 10, you can get 30 or 40 for the right group. No problem. But if you get 500 and then you're never asked back again, that's a problem. Anyway, many in this group have little self-confidence. But once that's behind them, they tend to rocket forward pretty quickly. Some of these people will be on a steady course of increase throughout their whole life. Others reach their ceiling much earlier. The fact is, nearly all of them reach it at some point, blow past it, and then create new ceilings. Only level 1 people do this. So what level 1 people are realizing is that they have a capacity to speak really well, connect with people really well, and people that hear them want to hear them again and again. And they're willing to pay for it. They're willing to pay a lot for it. And the reason being is because they get a lot out of it. Okay, so I was using speaking as an example of the differing levels within levels, but I'm also using speaking as an example to show that whatever it is that they're doing, they keep breaking barriers. They begin on a higher level and break barriers to go to even higher levels, and that's what level 1 people do, and only level 1 people do it. Okay, so there's a parable in the New Testament known as the parable of the talents. And so they're identified as levels of responsibility. So, or one's ability to respond, right? So a landowner goes away in this story in the New Testament on a trip and leaves money with each person based on their differing degrees of responsibility. So to one guy, he leaves 10 talents. Let's just say to one guy, he leaves $10, to another $5, and to another $1. Now, the servant who received the $10, we should make that a higher number, I think. Let's say $100, $50, and $10. That's probably makes more sense. So the servant who received $100, he took that money and made more. So he took that and earned more by putting his money to work. So let's say he went out and purchased 100. Let's say he went out and purchased some equipment, and he's in a large neighborhood, and he took that $100 and he went to Walmart and he bought some Windex, he bought some razor blades, blah, 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 blah. He had a ladder at home, and he decided to go through the neighborhood and wash people's windows for, let's say, $4 a window. And at the end of the week, or whenever the landowner returned, he had $580 because he took that $100 and put it to work. So that's what this story represents. And the reason why he was given 100 and the other person was given 50 is because these levels of money in the story represent levels of responsibility as the landowner saw it in each person. So basically, he recognized that this guy deserves 100 because he'll do much more with it. This guy deserves 10 because I'm not sure what he's going to do with it. But I don't want to waste my money on him, so we'll see what happens. That's kind of what's playing out here. This guy was praised and rewarded for his talent and his ingenuity. So the guy that received $50 did the same thing. He didn't gain as much more as the person with the $100, but he gained enough to deserve some praise and recognition for his efforts. So this just shows us that we all increase in line with our abilities, but we all can increase from where we started. So to the degree that you have any talent or ability, there's a starting line. There's a starting point for you. Just so you understand how this works. And then from that starting point, you can increase to a certain degree, and that's just the way this works. So everybody has a different starting line. Think about the Olympics when the track and field guys are out there, gals, guys, whatever, and when they're doing that relay race, each starting line is at a different spot, right, around the track. I want you to think of it like that. Certain people are further ahead, and I understand that that's based upon the circle and where they are in relationship to the inner edge of the circle. So it's really, they're starting at the same place. They're just not in each other's way. I understand that, but just take that part away for a minute and just imagine them starting at different places. And that's kind of how this story plays out. Okay. The servant who received, we'll call it $10, what did he do? He buried it in the ground because he was afraid of his master. So what was he afraid of in his master? He understood that his master was shrewd and he was utilitarian. But this was only knowledge. So he had knowledge about the landowner that he worked for. But that knowledge never translated into a corresponding action that was in direct proportion to the information that he had. So he knew the guy was shrewd. He knew the guy, I think that the story talks about, he reaps where he doesn't even plant. In other words, this guy has a golden finger. He has the ability to just make money. People like that. I read an article one time in Reader's Digest about different people who received lottery winnings and how many were bankrupt within, 2 years of their lottery winnings. One individual, he went out and the first thing he did was buy 13 cars and gave them to his friends. Like, that's stupid. But, that's what he did. How many times do you see professional athletes walking around in floor-length white mink coats in the middle of spring, flaunting their revenue? I know another individual. His job is consulting football players, professional football players, helping them keep their money because the people that tend to want to run their lives steal all of it. And the players are unaware. So there are people out there that have knowledge of the master, let's say, the landowner, but what they know about that owner, they don't act on. So the guy that had $10, he buried it in the ground because he was afraid to lose it. He was afraid he would get in trouble because he knew money means a lot to this guy. So rather than put his money to work like everybody else did, he didn't do anything. Now, what's interesting about this story, okay, if you read the story, it gives you the words of what the landowner is saying, and it gives you the words of what any of the servants are saying. And if you look at this ancient parable, the one who did the least speaks the most in defense of his actions. So this is so typical. The one who did the least when it came to actions did the most when it comes to words. And what a joke, but pretty funny. All right, let's look at level 2. What is a level 2 emotional maturity level? This is where the majority of people sit, in my opinion. Okay, we'll call it average. Okay, they don't have to stay there probably, but many don't believe they can leave. They work hard. They're usually satisfied with the status quo. So whether it's, talking themselves into it, talking themselves out of it, or sheer ignorance, they seem content with whatever happens as long as it's not too bad. So many of these people will move from job to job rather than moving up within one job. They zigzag their way forward as opposed to rocketing straight up. And like level 1, there are levels within the level 2 maturity ranking. They go to school, they graduate, and they do something useful. They have average and sometimes better than average IQ, but not the best IQ, let's say. They might even have a PhD, but may struggle negotiating a conflict or working well with all types of people. Their conversation is decent. They can converse with level 1 types, level 2 types, and level 3 types. They don't seem to have whatever they want, though. They hope and dream, but many times fail to achieve the dreams they hope for. They may even settle for less as opposed to fighting for what they want. So all in all, they live good, productive lives. What they don't know doesn't really seem to hurt them. So some of these people are candidates for level 1, but they fail to realize it for one reason or another. So the top level 2 maturity person could likely enter into a level 1 type emotional maturity person, but they don't know they can, and they never know they can. And if somebody tells them they can, they tend to talk themselves out of it. This is likely due to self-confidence issues. So mid-level 2 people will put their carry-on in the overhead compartment on a plane lengthwise and hog all the room and not know they're doing it. They'll place under the seat material in the overhead bin without thinking about the instructions that were just given to them, or they just ignore them. They sit in the aisle seat and they buckle up only to have to unbuckle to let everybody else in the other 2 seats. I don't know if you've ever witnessed any of this, by the way. So what is going on here? Why would you sit in the aisle seat and buckle up only to unbuckle 2 more times? Uh, and this is what they do. Have you ever sat on a plane as people got on the plane and just watched people stand in the aisle, hold up the entire line, and converse with somebody, completely unaware that they're holding up the line? Putting luggage in the overhead bin the wrong way. Uh, the handle's sticking out and they can't shut it because the bag is oversized, but they keep trying anyway. They don't get it right off the bat. What is going on here? This is something they probably can't fix. It's a lack of judgment. It's called extrinsic practical judgment, and they just lack it. They lack clarity on what to do and when to do it and how to do it. They just don't know. How often have you ever helped somebody move? A friend calls you. Hey, it's moving day this Saturday. We're serving pizza. We want you to come. Whatever. I've been a part of those many times. And you show up, and they're moving things out of the house, and you going in the house and you're picking up pieces of furniture and you're taking it out and you're setting it down and you're waiting. And then there's always the guy, that's kind of telling everybody kind of what to do. They're orchestrating, the furniture into the back of the truck to get as much room as possible. Blah, 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 blah. You know the deal. And then there's this person that they're standing around and they're looking around almost as if they're sort of lost. Now, they have a good job. They may have a family. They drive a fairly nice car. And they pick up a piece of furniture, kind of an awkward piece of furniture. They walk it into the back of the truck. They push it up against the stack that's there. And you look at it and it makes no sense at all. And they just look at you like, what? Can you relate to this? Oh my God. And you're thinking, if you're like me, you're watching this and you're thinking, what? Why did you just put that there? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. This is just great. We got all different types of people, folks. I know a guy. He helped us move. I mean, he helped us pack the truck many years ago. I had been putting things into the truck the way I thought they should go, as were some other people. And he was the quiet guy. He wasn't a man of words, and I wouldn't even call him a man of action. He was like furniture. Super reliable, super dependable, always there, willing to always lend a hand, very, very low key person. And he just stopped everything. He just goes, okay, stop. Hold on a second. Let's pull this out. Let's pull this out. Let's pull this out. And he pulled like 4 or 5 things out. And I'm like, dadgum, we got to get this thing loaded. But he pulled all this stuff out and then he put it all back. And when he did, he gained another 2 feet. And I remember being a little confused. Like, how did you just do that? Well, what's interesting is he saw it before any of us did. Like a chess game. Like he knew he was 3 moves ahead. This is a very high level of practical intelligence, folks, that he had. And I never forgot it. And you know what it caused me to do? It caused me to really pay more attention to my spatial thinking. And I've increased it since. I saw it, I learned from it, and I told him, I said, dude, you're amazing. So rather than, making some excuse as to why I couldn't do it, or being embarrassed or trying to defend my way of packing, or this is my moving day. What are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. I acknowledged what he did. I praised him for what he did. I learned from what he did, and I put it into practice the next time I loaded a truck. I just became far more thoughtful. I paid more attention, and I wanted to be like that. I didn't want to waste my energy or waste my time. Anyway, that's how that works. All right, let's talk about level 3 people. So we're talking about emotional maturity levels. This is the lowest level, and it's really surprising how many people are on this level, by the way. These people are like, I don't know how to put this, but pets. Okay, just think they're kind of like pets. You have to emotionally feed them, you give them treats, and you can find them annoying when they fail to pick up on behavioral cues. I think these types are more tolerated than appreciated in the world. They don't know when to speak. They don't know when to be quiet. They don't see interrupting as an interruption. They don't realize hardly any of these things. They're time vampires. They hog conversations. I call them ball hogs. They hog the conversation, and no one can get a word in edgewise, and they don't realize that they're hogging the conversation. They will repeat a story they've already told you more than once and not even be aware of it, and they'll do it in the same conversation. It's almost like you feel like petting them on the head and telling them to go out and play in the yard, because you're so frustrated with what's happening. They don't read books, and they're not at all technically or internet savvy. It's like they've never been online. They complain about life and how unfair life is, but they do nothing to change their circumstances. They prefer entertainment to advancement. They're maintainers, they're not obtainers. They blame and deny, and they talk about other people in negative terms. People on this level don't understand debt. They could have a high interest loan and think nothing of it simply because their payment is low in comparison to buying something at full price right on the spot. So they finance it, and because they can afford the monthly payment, in their mind, the item doesn't cost as much, when in reality, it's costing a whole lot more. Now, again, within level 3 maturity, there are many levels. So within this level, the lowest level of the level 3 mindset, these people will be in and out of court, prison, jail, in the principal's office when they're in school. These are what King Solomon calls the fools. They have no capacity for discerning anything important, and they never will. Without a leash, they'll bite people for no reason at all. And I'm using that illustratively. The mid-level of these people typically can't keep a job or a relationship for a very long time. They're defined by inconsistency and a seeming lack of knowledge. They go through people like clothing. They're takers more than givers, and they don't know it. Mid-level 3 people consume more than they create. They don't know when to pay a compliment or when to turn the television off. They're content with substandard and will eat all the wrong food. They usually have a few vices that work against them but deny it. They develop need-oriented relationships built on dependence as opposed to independence and things of this sort. In other words, often they keep doing the same thing, and without expecting a different result, they don't even know the result is bad, but they just keep doing it. These are the people that rob stores over and over again until they end up in prison forever. These are people that say dumb things to the wrong people. They do dumb things, and they can't seem to stop it. And they're always going to be around. They're always going to be here. These are the people that are porch pirates. These are the people that, rather than work hard for their money and then reward themselves with buying things they can appreciate, they just take yours. And they think nothing of it. They're actually psyched because they were able to take something that didn't belong to them, and in their mind they believe they deserve it. And so we're talking about level 3 types, and we're talking really about the lower levels in the level 3 types of maturity in humans. I went out one time. I had just moved into the house I'm in right now. We weren't here very long, and it was about 5 in the afternoon, and I went down the street. I opened the garage door. I drove the car out. I went down the street to pick up some chicken wings that we had ordered from this place called Wingstop. It's amazing, by the way. And it wasn't long. It was probably a 15-minute ride there and back. When I got home, my bike was stolen out of my garage, and it was an expensive bike. Gone. Now, I didn't have a camera then, but I was just thinking about the person who did this, and they see me leave, and in their mind, they're going, yes. And then they go up, they look in the garage, they see the bike, it was hanging on the wall. They take it off the hooks, they get on it and ride it right out of the driveway, and the whole while feeling like a hero. This is a level 3 brain. The odds of you working with people like this are slim, but they are everywhere. And it's why we have the Ring doorbell. It's why we lock our doors. It's why we're careful not to get into a spat on the highway with somebody who's driving erratically, because they might get out and shoot you. These are level 3 types. I'd say your prisons are full of level 3 types, and sometimes there's level 2s also in prison, obviously, because of maybe in the heat of a passionate moment or whatever, they did something dumb, or maybe they get caught, doing drugs. Level 1 people will do coke, by the way, if they think they're getting something out of it to increase their level. But they won't end up in the gutter. It's what we call white-collar drug abuse. So I don't want you to have the impression that a level 1 won't do anything stupid. They will, but it never takes them from their level, because they just don't move off. Level 1 people typically never move out of level 1. Level 2 people rarely ever go to level 3, and once in a while, some of them will go to level 1 and then never go back. Some people may begin on the highest level of level 2, work their way into level 1, and then slowly begin to work their way up in level 1. Some people are top level 2 until they're 40, and then after age 40, they get into level 1, and then it's up and away, and their whole life changes. My story, I believe I was a top level 2 who slipped into level 1, probably more by accident. That's why my first book was called The Power of Accidental Increase. I felt like I increased by accident, and I think the one thing that really helped me was reading the Wisdom of Solomon for 30 years, and always trying to apply it. I feel like I worked hard to get to where I am through a lot of trial and error. So it was a little zigzaggy for me. And now that I'm where I am and I think the way I think, there's just certain things I will never do. So I'm 56. You will never see me on a skateboard ever. People say, oh, you should try this, or get on the longboard. No, absolutely not, because I know the odds of that thing slipping out from underneath my feet and me falling and breaking a wrist or my forearm or my hip or some crazy thing like that is it's in the cards, so I'm not playing that game. I There are certain roller coasters I will not go on simply because I know there's like 1 in a million shot that it could break and you could fall out, and I don't want it to be me. I'll never jump out of an airplane. Now that doesn't mean level 1 people don't jump out of airplanes. Many do. Everybody's level is contingent upon how they think and what they'll do and not do, but what they do and not do works for them. The thing with me is I know I am accident prone because I know I am uncoordinated. I've been uncoordinated my whole life. That's why I was terrible at sports. See, the difference is I know it. The problem with so many people is they don't know the facts about their own life and they live according to an illusion, and it's always why things keep screwing up. So, let's do a recap. Level 1 maturity levels. These people increase knowledge and wisdom through their life. They meet goals and they take personal responsibility easily. They recognize personal strengths, they recognize personal weaknesses, and they recognize their limitations. They believe they can accomplish their dreams, and they measure themselves up to higher ideals rather than measuring themselves down to lower ideals. Level 2 people, this is an average level, functional and educated, these people types. They learn what is necessary to maintain the status quo, plus a little bit more. They may recognize strengths and weaknesses, but may or may not do anything about it. They dream about more than they might actually do. And then the low level, the 3 level of emotional maturity, these people do not bother to increase their knowledge. They are not aware of their strengths. They're not aware of their weaknesses. They don't know their limitations. They invent their own rules and they live down to them. They take no personal responsibility. They blame and deny. And everybody is at risk when around them. Nothing is their fault. And that is the telltale sign of a level 3 maturity level. And the telltale sign of a level 1 maturity level, I'm sorry, that was my fault. I'll take care of that. Thank you. So that's how it works. Maybe you're asking the question, what do I do with this information? I'm sure you're asking that question. I would be asking that question. Well, it depends. Where are you? I'm going to make an assumption that all of you listening to this podcast are either in the top level 2 or in level 1 somewhere, because those are the people that listen to podcasts. Where are you? Where are you? That's the question. And where do you want to go? Where are you in your life, and what's keeping you from going further? Now, when I say where are you and where do you want to go, I mean, what are you doing and what do you want to do? What are you being and are you content with it? Who are you with, and is that relationship working for you or against you? Is your job working for you or against you? Is your money working for you or against you? Like, what is going on? And what I'm going to suggest to you is this. I want you to think long and hard about your current state of affairs, and then I want you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being so awesome you can't stand it, and 1 being terrible. And where are you on that scale? If you are less than a 6, then you have room for growth. If you're listening to this podcast, the likelihood of you moving on from where you are right now in your current state of affairs to a better place are high. And likely the reason why you aren't doing it is because you are afraid, or you don't believe you can, or you don't believe you're worthy, or you don't know how smart you actually are. It's usually things like this. Or you're focusing too heavily on the risks rather than the rewards. But what I would suggest you do is get around people who have a way of moving forward regardless of their circumstances, those who take calculated risks, those who have had poor relationships and have cut them off and moved on to better relationships, those who adjust their beliefs when they need adjustment. That's a whole nother topic, so I'm not going to get started on that. But those who are constantly tuning up the engine, those are the people you want to spend more time with. Now, there's plenty of people that I love and adore that I spend time with that aren't, moving up all the time in the world and things like that, simply because they're just great people and they make me feel great, and they're just awesome people. So these maturity scales aren't rating people from a moral standpoint or even really a character standpoint, unless you get into level 3 people. It's just showing you how people think, how they make judgments, all these types of things. And then what does that translate into in terms of where they are in the world and in relationship to where they maybe would want to be or so forth. But anyway, get a hold of some material. If you don't like reading books, you should be listening to books. It's a lot easier. And what's cool about that is you can always rewind it 30 seconds at a time. You can slow it down. You can speed it up. You can speed listen. It's terrific. You can plow through books like a freak with Audible. So if you're not, learning about the things that intrigue you and can give you a leg up in the world, you should be doing that. Why you're not doing it, I have no idea. But don't take up space in the world. Increase your space in the world. So that's all I've got for today. A lot of what I've been talking about is in my book, The 4 People Types and What Drives Them, if you're interested in that. So I hope you get your hands on that. It is in Audible, but I'm not the one reading it, unfortunately. But it's very good. The guy that's reading it is awesome. People like it. So if you want to buy the paperback, you can do that. I think it's also on Kindle. So anyway, you've been listening to Behavioral Insights, and you know who is speaking. It's me, Steve, your host. So have a great weekend. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's the weekend for me. It's Saturday morning. And whatever day it is that you're listening to this, have yourself a great day. And until next time, take some time to level up, my friends.